I came home late that evening, exhausted from work, expecting to be greeted by the usual routine, maybe a half-hearted kiss, maybe a cold shoulder, depending on whatever mood Emily was in that day. Instead, I stepped into silence. No TV buzzing, no scent of dinner, just an eerie emptiness hanging in the air. Something felt off. I tossed my keys on the counter and called out, "Emily?" No answer. My stomach twisted. Maybe she went out. But then I saw it. A single note, slapped onto the kitchen island like an afterthought. "Don't blame me." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just those three gutless words, scribbled in her careless handwriting. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I scanned the house. Her closet? Empty. Suitcases? Gone. The jewelry I bought her? Vanished. She took everything, her belongings, her life, her so-called respect for me, and just disappeared. For a split second, I thought maybe she was kidnapped. But no, this wasn't some crime scene. This was the work of a cold-blooded traitor. And then it hit me. The late nights. The sudden interest in going to the gym. The way she always turned her phone screen away when I walked into the room. She had a lover. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. I slammed my fists on the counter so hard the note fluttered to the floor. Emily. My wife. My partner for 10 years. The woman who once looked at me like I hung the damn moon. Gone. And not just gone, she left for someone else. My fists clenched. Who was he? Who was this worthless, pathetic parasite who thought he could just walk into my life and take what was mine? I wasn't going to let it go. Not a chance in hell. I grabbed my phone and started dialing. Friends, family, even that annoying neighbor Karen who somehow knew everyone's business. I was going to find out who this bastard was, and when I did, his world was going to burn. I stood there, gripping the note so hard it crumpled in my fist. My mind raced. She didn't just leave, she erased herself from our life like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I grabbed my phone, dialing her number. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. I texted. "Where are you?" No response. I fired off another. "Who is he?" 3 dots appeared. My heart pounded. Then they disappeared. She was watching. She saw me breaking apart in real time and didn't even have the decency to say a word. I stormed into our bedroom, yanking open drawers. Empty. The walk-in closet? A ghost town. Then I noticed something. She didn't just take her clothes, she took the expensive ones, the ones she never wore with me. The red dress I bought her last Christmas? Gone. The diamond bracelet she said was too flashy? Gone. Like she had been planning this. I sat on the bed, my head in my hands. The scent of her perfume still clung to the sheets, mocking me. Just this morning, she kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. The betrayal settled in my chest like a stone. But I wasn't going to be some broken-hearted fool sitting around crying over a woman who clearly had no soul. No. I was going to find her. I was going to find him. And I was going to rip his life apart. I tore through her nightstand, looking for anything, an address, a clue, something. Nothing. Then I checked her laptop. Password protected. But her old phone? She never wiped it. I powered it on, my hands shaking with rage. The messages loaded. And there it was. A text thread under the name Ava, but I wasn't an idiot. Can't wait for tonight. He has no clue lol. Leaving today. Meet me at the hotel. My breath hitched. My vision blurred. A hotel. I scrolled up, finding the name. Brian Carter. My stomach twisted. I knew that name. My hands gripped the phone so hard I thought it would crack. Brian Carter. The same bastard who came to my house 6 months ago, shaking my hand, sitting at my dinner table, grinning at my wife while I poured him a damn drink. A friend. A coworker. A snake. I saw red. Before I even realized what I was doing, I was in my car, speeding down the highway, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I pulled up to the hotel, some overpriced place downtown. I walked in, chest heaving, fists clenched. The receptionist barely had time to react before I slammed my hand on the counter. Brian Carter. What room? She stammered, flinching at the fire in my eyes. I can't give that information. I leaned in. You will tell me. She gulped, glancing around. Then she caved. Room 814. I didn't even thank her. I stormed to the elevator, pressing the button so hard I thought I'd break it. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I kicked the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. And there they were. Emily. Wrapped in nothing but the sheets. Brian. Wide-eyed, frozen mid-movement. The room smelled of betrayal. Of sweat and perfume and everything that told me exactly what had just happened. Emily gasped, pulling the covers up. What the hell, Jack? Brian scrambled up, hands raised. Bro, listen. I lunged. One punch. That's all it took to send him sprawling off the bed. He crashed into the nightstand, knocking over a lamp. Emily screamed. Are you crazy? I turned to her. Am I crazy? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You left me a note. You didn't even have the balls to say it to my face. She scoffed, like I was the problem. Jack, don't be dramatic. You knew we weren't happy. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. No, you weren't happy. Instead of talking to me like a decent human being, you ran off with this piece of garbage? Brian groaned on the floor. It just happened, man. I kicked him in the ribs. Just happened? I laughed again, shaking my head. You sat at my table. Ate my food. Shook my damn hand. Emily rolled her eyes. Oh my God, are you done? It's over, Jack. Move on. I turned to her, heart pounding, breathing ragged. Over? You think you get to walk away that easy? She scoffed. Yeah. I do. And you'll thank me one day. Then she smiled. Like this was funny. Like my world hadn't just collapsed. Something inside me snapped. I leaned in close, voice low and cold. You think I'm just going to let this slide? I glanced at Brian, who was coughing, clutching his ribs. You think you're walking away from this? Emily sighed dramatically, slipping out of bed, not even bothering to cover herself. Jack, I don't care what you do. Just get out. I stared at her, at the woman I once loved, and realized something. I didn't feel heartbreak anymore. I felt fury. I felt vengeance. She took everything from me. But I was about to take everything from them. And they had no idea what was coming. I didn't move. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at Emily like I was seeing her for the first time. This wasn't my wife. This was a stranger. Brian was still on the floor, groaning, clutching his ribs like the pathetic worm he was. Emily? She didn't even flinch. She just sighed, like I was some inconvenience ruining her little romantic getaway. You're embarrassing yourself, Jack, she muttered, slipping on a robe. Just leave. Just leave. Like I was the outsider. Like I was the intruder in my own damn life. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage to settle. Not because I forgave her. Not because I was giving up. But because I was calculating. Emily had already underestimated me. So had Brian. They thought I was just some heartbroken idiot who'd storm out and disappear. No. I was going to destroy them. I stepped back, tilting my head, letting a slow smirk creep onto my face. You're right. She frowned, caught off guard. Wait, what? You're right, I repeated, nodding. I should go. I should move on. Brian, still on the floor, let out a relieved chuckle. Yeah, man. That's probably best. I looked down at him, my smirk widening. You should probably get that rib checked. Wouldn't want anything broken. His face paled. I turned back to Emily. Enjoy your night. Seriously. Celebrate. You won. She hesitated, eyes narrowing. Jack. I just chuckled and walked out, closing the door behind me. The moment I hit the lobby, I grabbed my phone. I didn't need a baseball bat or a gun to destroy them. I needed information. And I already had it. I dialed the first number. Hey, Greg. You still work in cybersecurity? By morning, I had everything. Bank statements. Private messages. Emails. Emily and Brian weren't just screwing each other. They were screwing up, badly. Brian had been skimming money from his company. Not a little. A lot. Enough to put him behind bars. Emily? She wasn't just cheating. She was invested. She'd moved thousands from our joint account to some private savings account under Brian's name. She planned to run away with him. Start fresh. With my money. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I made my next call. By noon, Brian's company had frozen all his assets. By 2 p.m., the cops were knocking on his office door. By 5 p.m., his face was plastered all over the news, business executive under investigation for fraud. And by 7 p.m., my phone rang. Emily. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I picked up. What? I said, voice calm. She was breathing hard. Jack, what the hell did you do? I leaned back in my chair, sipping my whiskey. What do you mean? His accounts are frozen, the company's pressing charges. I smiled. Damn. Sounds rough. She was silent for a second. Then, softer. Jack. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed. Actually laughed. You didn't mean to drain our accounts? You didn't mean to run off with a thief? She swallowed. Please. Just tell them it's a mistake. I can fix this. Yeah? I swirled the whiskey in my glass. Like how you fixed our marriage? Jack, You chose this, Emily, I interrupted, voice sharp now. You left. You lied. You threw away everything for a guy who's probably packing his bags and leaving you in the dust right now. Silence. A choked breath. I hit the speaker button and scrolled through my emails. Oh, and by the way, you might want to check your bank account. That little private one you thought was so clever. Her breath hitched. I smiled. Yeah. It's empty. I didn't touch it. But the government did. Something about complicity in financial fraud or whatever. Turns out, when you tie your finances to a criminal, things get messy. She gasped. You bastard. I chuckled. No, Emily. You're just an idiot. Then I hung up. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That she disappeared into oblivion and I never had to deal with her again. But life isn't that neat. Because 2 days later, she showed up at my doorstep. Soaking wet from the rain. Makeup smeared. Eyes red. "Jack," she whispered. "I have nowhere to go." I stared at her. This woman, who had shattered me. Who had laughed in my face. Who had chosen another man. Now she wanted my mercy. I stepped aside. She let out a relieved breath, stepping in. And I grabbed the door. "Wait," I said. She turned, confused. And I slammed it in her face. I stood there, listening. For a second, nothing. Then a sob. A desperate, broken sob. She pounded on the door. "Jack. Please. Just let me talk." I closed my eyes. Then, calmly, I turned around and walked away. I never looked back. She kept pounding on the door. Fist after fist, her cries turning into screams, then back to sobs. I stood in the hallway, breathing slowly, letting it all sink in. This was it. This was the moment she realized she lost. Not just Brian. Not just the money. Everything. I should have felt satisfied. Maybe even victorious. But all I felt was, nothing. I waited, arms crossed, listening as her fists grew weaker. As the sobs faded into silence. Then, finally, footsteps. Slow. Dragging. She was leaving. I exhaled. But then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Jack," a voice rasped. I frowned. "Who is this?" "You ruined my life, man." I grinned. "Brian." I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. There he was, standing across the street in the rain. Soaked. Hood up. Hands in his pockets. "Shouldn't you be in jail?" I asked, amused. "Charges aren't official yet." His voice was shaky. "But you made sure I lost everything. My job. My house. My money." I took a slow sip of whiskey. "Yeah, well. You stole my wife." He let out a bitter laugh. "Please. You lost her. You were too blind to see it coming. And now? You think you won?" I leaned against the window. "I don't think I won, Brian." "I know I did." Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "You should watch your back." I smiled. "You should run." I hung up. The next morning, I woke up to 2 things, a raging headache and a voicemail. From Emily. I almost deleted it without listening. But curiosity won. Her voice was raw, strained, like she hadn't slept. "Jack," she started, pausing like she didn't even know what to say. I just don't understand how you could be so cold." I scoffed. "You used to love me," she continued. "No matter what, I always thought. I don't know. That you'd care. That you'd never just throw me away like this." She sniffled. "I made a mistake. I know that. But you destroyed me. And for what? Revenge? You think that makes you better than me?" Silence. Then, softer. "I never stopped loving you." Click. I stared at my phone, lips curled in disgust. Loving me? After everything? After lying to my face, after sneaking around like some shameless little snake, after throwing me away like yesterday's trash? Love? That wasn't love. That was manipulation. She thought she could guilt me. She thought she could play me. I was done playing. I deleted the voicemail. Then I called my lawyer. Divorce papers were filed that afternoon. My lawyer, Frank, raised an eyebrow when he saw the details. "You sure you want to do this?" "Absolutely." He shrugged, flipping through the documents. "You're leaving her with nothing. No assets, no savings. Not even the house." I smiled. "I know." He let out a low whistle. "Brutal. She deserves worse." He smirked. "Can't argue with that." I signed the last page. It was final. Emily Rogers? No longer my problem. But here's the thing about people like Emily. They don't just leave. They linger. 3 days after I served her the papers, I came home late to find my front door open. Just a crack. I tensed. Every instinct in me screamed danger. Slowly, I pushed it open. The house was dark. Silent. But something felt wrong. Then I smelled it. Her perfume. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Emily. No answer. But then, rustling. In the living room. I turned the corner, fists clenched, and there she was. Sitting on the couch, barefoot, wearing one of my old hoodies. A half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. I exhaled sharply. "How the hell did you get in?" She smiled lazily. "Still had my key." I stepped forward, towering over her. "You're trespassing." She pouted. "Oh, come on, Jack. Don't be so cruel." I snatched the bottle from the table and took a long sip. "What do you want?" Her lips parted, but she hesitated. I smirked. "You don't even know, do you?" She looked away. I have nothing, Jack. That's not my problem." Her head snapped back, eyes blazing. "It should be. We were together for 10 years. And you threw it away for a 2-bit con artist," I shot back. "Not my fault you bet on the wrong horse." She flinched. Then, suddenly, she lunged forward, grabbing my face between her hands. Her lips crashed against mine. For a split second, I froze. Then I shoved her back. She gasped, eyes wide. I wiped my mouth, glaring. "You don't get to do that." She trembled, hands balled into fists. "I still love you, Jack." I laughed. "No, Emily. You love control." Her eyes flickered with something dark. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head. "Will I?" She stormed past me, yanking the door open. Then she turned back, eyes glistening. "One day, you'll miss me." I met her gaze, cold and unwavering. "Not a chance." She slammed the door behind her. And that was the last time I ever saw her. They say betrayal changes a man. They're right. I walked away from that wreckage a different person. Stronger. Smarter. Untouchable. Emily thought she broke me. But she only forged something colder. And Brian? Last I heard, he fled the country. Running from debts, from the law, from me. Good. Because if I ever saw him again, I'd finish what I started. A month passed. Then 2. Emily was gone. Brian had disappeared. For the first time in years, my house was mine again. Silent. Still. No fake apologies. No whispered lies. Just peace. But peace is a funny thing. You don't realize how uneasy it makes you until you have too much of it. One night, I woke up to a sound. Faint. Distant. I lay still, listening. Then, again. A soft thud outside. I slid out of bed, grabbed the baseball bat from under my nightstand, and moved toward the window. The street was empty. But my car? There was something on the windshield. A note. I moved fast, stepping onto the porch, scanning the street. No one. Just the hum of streetlights. I pulled the note free. Not over. No name. No signature. But I didn't need one. I crushed the paper in my fist. I should have known Emily wouldn't let go. I went back inside, locked every door, every window. Then I poured myself a drink. The game wasn't over. Fine. I was ready to play. 2 days later, my bank account got flagged. Fraud alert. Someone had tried to access my savings. I called the bank immediately. Who the hell did this? The rep hesitated. It was attempted from an old shared account. The name on the request was Emily Rogers. I laughed. Actually laughed. Unbelievable. Sir, we've already locked the account and flagged it for security. Would you like to press charges? I drummed my fingers against the counter. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to bury her. But something told me this wasn't just about money. No, I said. Not yet. I had a better idea. That night, I waited. I killed the lights, sat in my living room, and listened. At 2 a.m., she showed up. The front door rattled. A soft, careful touch. Then, a faint click. I gripped the bat tighter. The lock turned. The door creaked open an inch. I moved fast. Before she could step inside, I yanked the door open and grabbed her wrist. She gasped, eyes wide in the dark. Looking for something? I asked. She yanked back, but I held firm. Jack, please. I pulled her inside and slammed the door shut. What's the endgame here, Emily? You steal from me, break into my house, what next? She was breathing hard, panic in her eyes. I just needed to talk to you. You don't break into someone's house to talk. She swallowed hard. I had nowhere else to go. Bullshit. Her face twisted. You did this to me. You ruined my life. I let out a slow, bitter chuckle. I ruined your life? You took everything, she shrieked. You made sure I had nothing left. I shook my head. You did that yourself. I just made sure you felt it. She clenched her jaw, trembling. I loved you, Jack. I stepped closer. Then why did you betray me? She blinked. I don't know. Wrong answer. Her breathing hitched. I was stupid. I was selfish. But Brian, he's worse. You don't know what he's really done. I frowned. What are you talking about? She swallowed hard, shifting from foot to foot. I thought he had money. I thought he was safe. But, he's dangerous, Jack. He doesn't just steal. He hurts people. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Where is he? I asked. She hesitated. I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at me. Emily. Where is he? She shivered. He's coming back. My grip tightened. For what? For you. By morning, I had a gun. I wasn't stupid. The law might have rules, but guys like Brian? They didn't play by them. Emily stayed on my couch, quiet, staring at the floor. I poured coffee and sat across from her. Tell me everything. She bit her lip. He thinks you took more than just his money. He thinks you know things you shouldn't. Like what? She shook her head. I don't know. But he's desperate. He's angry. And he doesn't forgive. I leaned back. Good. Neither do I. She glanced up. Jack, please. Let's just leave. Start over somewhere else. Forget all of this. I smirked. That's cute. But no. Her face fell. Why not? Because I don't run. 2 nights later, he showed up. I saw his shadow first. Moving along the fence line, slow and deliberate. I stepped onto the porch, gun in hand. Come on out, Brian, I called. Silence. Then, from the darkness, his voice. You really think this is over? I cocked the gun. I think it's about to be. A laugh. Low. Menacing. You can't stop me, Jack. I aimed into the dark. I don't need to. The cops are already on their way. Silence. Then, footsteps. Quick. Running. I fired into the air. Boom. He stopped. I stepped off the porch, closing the distance. You're done, Brian. The fraud. The threats. All of it. He turned slowly. And for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Fear. He licked his lips. You're serious. I pressed the barrel against his chest. Dead serious. His breath came fast. Then, suddenly, he laughed. You don't have it in you, he whispered. I smiled. Then I swung. The butt of the gun slammed into his jaw. He stumbled, cursing, hitting the ground hard. I leaned over him. You're wrong about a lot of things, Brian. But mostly, you're wrong about me. Red and blue lights flashed down the street. Sirens roared. He groaned, rolling onto his side. I stood, watching as the cops swarmed him. Emily stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself. She met my eyes. I shook my head. Never again. She looked away. The officers hauled Brian to his feet. One turned to me. You pressing charges? I smirked. Every single one. I thought it was over. Brian was in cuffs, Emily was out of my life, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The weight of betrayal, the rage, the constant watching over my shoulder, I told myself it was done. But peace doesn't come easy. 2 weeks after Brian was arrested, I got a message. No name, no number, just a single sentence. You made a mistake. I sat back, staring at the screen. The rational part of me wanted to ignore it. Could have been some bitter friend of Brian's, maybe Emily playing games. But my gut? It told me different. I called Frank, my lawyer. Get me everything on Brian. His business, his contacts, anything shady he's done. Frank sighed. Jack, I told you, this guy's finished. You buried him. Enjoy your win. I don't feel like celebrating yet, I said. Something's off. A pause. Then, fine. I'll dig. I hung up, the unease twisting in my gut. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, I had my answer. Frank showed up at my house, a thick folder in his hand. He dropped it on my kitchen table and slid it toward me. Brian wasn't just scamming businesses, he said. He was laundering money. Big money. We're talking cartel-level numbers. I frowned. Cartel? Frank nodded. And the people he worked with? They don't take betrayal lightly. I flipped through the pages. Bank statements, fake invoices, offshore accounts. It was worse than I thought. So what does this mean? I asked. Frank exhaled. It means you didn't just take down some con artist, Jack. You screwed over people who kill for less. I ran a hand down my face. Great. Frank leaned in. We need to get ahead of this. If Brian cut a deal, if he starts talking, he'll sell me out to save himself, I finished. Frank nodded. I closed the folder. So what do we do? The first thing I did was disappear. Not forever. Just long enough to put some distance between me and the mess I'd uncovered. I packed a bag, grabbed a burner phone, and drove out of the city. Checked into a motel off the highway under a fake name. Then I waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. Then, on the 4th, a knock at my motel door. Soft. 3 taps. I reached for my gun. Jack, it's me. Emily. I opened the door just enough to see her. She looked different. Tired. Desperate. She pushed past me before I could stop her. How the hell did you find me? I asked. She turned, eyes wild. Jack, you don't get it. Brian's out. I froze. What? She swallowed hard. I saw him. Yesterday. He's out on bail. My grip on the gun tightened. No. That wasn't possible. The charges were too serious. The evidence too strong. Unless. He cut a deal, I said. She nodded. Of course he did. He had information worth more than a prison sentence. And now? He was free. And he'd be looking for payback. Emily stepped closer. Jack, you have to leave. For real this time. He's not coming alone. I studied her face. The fear was real. But so was something else, something I couldn't quite place. Why do you care? I asked. Her breath hitched. Because I still. I held up a hand. Don't. Don't you dare say it. She flinched. I paced, heart hammering. If Brian was out, I had 2 options. Run. Or finish this. I turned back to Emily. Where is he? She shook her head. No, Jack. Where is he? She hesitated. Then, softly, she said, the warehouse. The one by the docks. I grabbed my keys. She grabbed my arm. Jack, please. Don't do this. I pulled free. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, Emily. The warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. I parked a block away, gun tucked in my jacket, and moved in the shadows. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. Dim lights flickered overhead. Then, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I raised my gun. Brian stepped out of the dark, hands in his pockets, smirking like he hadn't just lost everything. Jack, he said, voice smooth. I was hoping you'd come. I kept my gun steady. Big mistake getting out of that cell, Brian. He chuckled. You don't get it, do you? I wanted out. Not to run. To finish this. From behind him, more figures emerged. 5, maybe 6. Armed. I exhaled slowly. Cartel friends? I asked. Brian grinned. Let's just say. I made some new friends. I tightened my grip. You should have stayed in jail. He shrugged. Maybe. But I'd rather watch you bleed. I fired first. Chaos exploded. Gunshots. Shouts. The warehouse filled with smoke and metal. I ducked behind a crate, reloading, heart pounding. 1 down. 2. But they kept coming. Then, pain. A sharp, burning pain in my side. I gritted my teeth, pressing a hand to the wound. Brian's voice cut through the noise. "You're done, Jack." I peeked out. He was moving toward me, gun raised. One shot. That's all I needed. I steadied my aim. Then, another shot rang out. Brian jerked, eyes wide. He staggered. Blood bloomed on his chest. Behind him, Emily lowered a smoking gun. Our eyes met. Then Brian collapsed. Silence. I exhaled, clutching my wound. Emily took a shaky step forward. "Jack, I held up a hand. Then I turned and walked out. She called after me. But I didn't stop. Some things can't be forgiven. And some people? They don't get second chances. The wound burned like hell. I drove with one hand, the other pressing against my side, blood seeping between my fingers. The pain kept me sharp, kept me grounded. My mind raced through everything that had just happened, the gunfire, Brian dropping like dead weight, Emily standing there with that smoking gun. She had saved me. And I still didn't trust her. I pulled into a parking lot, an old diner off the highway. The neon open sign flickered in and out. I needed a second to breathe. To think. I stepped inside, gripping my side, forcing my expression to stay neutral. The waitress barely looked up as I slid into a booth. I ordered coffee, black. A man at the counter turned, eyes flicking over me. His stare lingered a second too long. I kept my head down. Then my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then a message popped up. "We're not done." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I glanced around the diner. Nobody else had their phone out. Nobody watching me too closely. But someone knew where I was. I stood up, tossed some cash on the table, and walked out. The second I stepped into the night air, I felt it. Eyes. Someone was watching me. I turned toward my car, hand resting near my gun. The parking lot was mostly empty. A truck, a sedan, an old muscle car that looked like it had been sitting there for years. Then, a flicker of movement in the reflection of my side mirror. I spun. A man. Stepping out of the shadows. Tall. Black leather jacket. A scar running down his jaw. "Jack," he said, his voice smooth. I didn't recognize him. "Who the hell are you?" I asked. The man smirked. "A messenger." I eased my gun from my jacket. "I don't like messages." He held up a hand. "No need for that. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." "We." So he wasn't alone. I scanned the lot again. Two more figures near the muscle car, leaning against it like they were just out for a smoke. But I could see the bulges under their coats. Guns. The man took a step closer. Brian was a mistake. I gritted my teeth. No. Brian was a problem. And I solved it. The man shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? He owed people. People who don't just forget." I clenched my jaw. "So what? You're here to collect?" The man smirked. "Not from you." That threw me. I frowned. "Then from who?" He let the question hang for a second. Then he chuckled. "Your wife." My stomach twisted. "Ex-wife." He shrugged. Emily was part of Brian's world, whether she admitted it or not. And now? She's a loose end. I exhaled slowly. "Where is she?" he asked. I didn't answer. His smirk widened. "You think you can save her?" I gripped my gun tighter. "I think you should walk away while you still can." The man sighed. "Shame. I was hoping you'd be smart about this. He reached into his jacket. I didn't wait. I fired. The bullet hit him square in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. His men scrambled for cover, guns flashing in the night. I dove behind my car as bullets shattered the windshield. This is bad. I took a deep breath. Counted. Then I popped up and fired twice. One of them dropped. The other cursed and ran. The first guy, the messenger, was still on the ground, gasping. His hand pressed against his chest, blood seeping through his jacket. I stepped closer, gun aimed at his head. He coughed. You're making a mistake, Jack. I pressed the barrel against his forehead. Already made plenty, I said. What's one more? I pulled the trigger. The silence afterward was deafening. I didn't wait. Didn't check if anyone else was watching. I got in my car, tires screeching as I tore out of the lot. Emily was next. I didn't give a damn what she'd done before. If these guys were after her, that meant one thing. She had something they wanted. And that meant she wasn't safe. I found her where I knew she'd be. Our old house. The one she left. The one I had let sit empty, untouched, because I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I parked down the street, watching. The lights were on. A shadow moved behind the curtains. I approached the door carefully, gun drawn. Knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Then the door creaked open. Emily stood there, wide-eyed. Jack? I pushed past her, locking the door behind me. We don't have time, I said. Pack a bag. She stared at me. What? They're coming for you, Emily. Her face paled. They want something from you, I said. Something Brian had. And they think you know where it is. She backed up, shaking her head. I don't know anything. Then why are they willing to kill for it? She swallowed hard. I grabbed her by the shoulders. Emily. If you're lying to me. I'm not, she cried. I swear, Jack. Brian never told me anything. I studied her face. She was scared. But was it fear of them? Or fear of the truth catching up to her? I had to make a choice. Trust her. Or leave her. The clock was ticking. And I had a feeling we were already out of time. The roar of an engine. Headlights flashing through the window. I grabbed Emily and pulled her down just as bullets ripped through the living room. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Stay down. I hissed, crawling toward the hallway. Emily was frozen, her hands clamped over her mouth. More shots. Then silence. Footsteps. They were coming in. I yanked Emily to her feet and dragged her toward the back door. We burst out into the cold night air, my gun tight in my grip. My car was too far. We had seconds, maybe less. Run, I whispered. She hesitated. Run. Emily bolted. I turned, aiming at the doorway just as the first guy stepped out. I fired. He crumpled. Another one. A flash of silver, a gun raised. I ducked. Rolled. Fired again. The second man hit the ground, groaning. More footsteps. I grabbed Emily's wrist and pulled her toward the alley behind the house. We sprinted through the darkness, lungs burning. Behind us, voices shouted. Orders. Commands. They weren't done. Neither was I. We made it to my car, breathless. I shoved Emily inside and peeled out of there so fast the tires screamed. Where are we going? She gasped. Somewhere safe, I said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Headlights. They're following us. Emily cried. I gritted my teeth. No kidding. The chase was on. They tried to ram us. I swerved, barely missing a lamppost. My side ached where the bullet had grazed me earlier, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. A gunshot. My back window shattered. Get down. I barked. Emily ducked as I jerked the wheel, cutting into a side street. Tires screeched behind us. They weren't giving up. Up ahead, an intersection. Red light. A truck barreling through. I gunned it. The truck missed us by inches. The car behind us wasn't so lucky. The crash was deafening. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. We were gone. An hour later, we were holed up in a motel off the highway. I sat on the edge of the bed, gun in my lap, mind racing. Emily sat across from me, arms wrapped around herself. You should have left me, she whispered. I looked at her. Maybe. Silence. Then she exhaled shakily. Jack, there's something I didn't tell you. I clenched my jaw. Of course there is. She swallowed. Before Brian got arrested, he told me something. About a drive. A hard drive. Said it had everything on it. Names. Accounts. Evidence. I stiffened. Where is it? I asked. Emily hesitated. Emily, I growled. She met my eyes. In a locker. At the train station. I cursed under my breath. You're just telling me this now? Tears welled in her eyes. I was scared, Jack. I ran a hand down my face. This was it. This was what they wanted. And if we had it? We had leverage. But it also meant we weren't safe. Not yet. We get the drive, I said. Then we disappear. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. I checked my gun. Let's go. The train station was nearly empty. Too empty. I felt it the second we stepped inside. Eyes. Watching. Waiting. Emily clutched my arm. Jack. Stay close, I murmured. We moved through the station, past rows of lockers. She stopped. Pointed. There. I reached into my pocket for the key she had given me. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid it into the lock. Turned it. The door creaked open. Inside, a small black hard drive. I grabbed it. Then the lights flickered. Footsteps. A slow clap. I turned. The man from before, the one I had shot in the parking lot, was standing at the far end of the station. A bandage wrapped around his shoulder. Behind him? 3 more. Armed. I exhaled through my nose. Should have stayed dead, I said. The man smirked. So should you. Then, gunfire. I shoved Emily behind the lockers, returning fire as bullets tore through the station. People screamed, running for cover. 1 down. 2. The man kept coming. I ducked, rolled, came up shooting. He flinched. Staggered. But kept moving. A blade flashed in his hand. Too close. I barely dodged. His knife sliced across my arm. Pain. I grabbed his wrist, twisted. The knife clattered to the floor. Then, Emily. She grabbed the knife. Before he could turn, she drove it into his chest. He gasped. Stared at her. Then crumpled. Silence. I panted, pressing a hand to my bleeding arm. Emily was shaking, the knife still in her grip. I pried it from her fingers. Tossed it. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "It's over," I said. She swallowed. Nodded. The hard drive burned in my pocket. Leverage. Power. Freedom. I took Emily's hand. "Let's disappear." And we did.